The gate agent looked at us confused, then said softly, "Her name isn't on the passenger list." My grandma froze, clutching her ticket folder like it might explain the mistake. My father just shrugged, sliding his own boarding pass across the counter. No arguments, no apologies, just the quiet cruelty of leaving her behind. I took her hand, guiding her back toward the exit, my chest tight. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a glitch in the system. It was a plan. Before I tell you what happened next, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Have you ever had to stand up for someone when your own family turned against them? When you grow up in a family like mine, appearances matter more than oxygen. The Hayes house was all shining hardwood floors, polished silver in the dining room, and perfectly framed portraits of vacations we barely survived. To outsiders, we looked picture perfect. But behind every smile was a silent bargain. Keep quiet, keep the peace, and don't question the people who held the purse strings. I was the middle child, which meant invisible most of the time. My brother Michael strutted around in designer suits, calling himself a businessman, even though every client dinner was charged to the family trust. My sister Rachel posted endless photos of luxury shopping trips, captioned like she'd earned them, when really she hadn't worked a day that wasn't padded by allowance. And then there was me, Lauren. Jeans, sneakers, nonprofit salary. I was the reminder of what they called bad choices. They'd whisper at dinner. She could have gone into law or finance. Why throw it away on charity work? What they didn't know was that my so-called bad choice was exactly what our grandfather had valued most. Grandpa James Hayes had been the only one who saw me for who I was. He'd take me fishing at dawn, handing me a thermos of black coffee even though I was just a teenager, saying, "One day you'll need to stay awake while everyone else is sleeping." He believed in quiet strength. He believed in loyalty. And before he passed, he created something my family had conveniently forgotten, a trust fund designed not just to preserve wealth, but to test who deserved to lead it. My parents, Charles and Eleanor, never spoke about that detail. They lived like the money was endless, and they raised Michael and Rachel to think the same. I'd watch Mom order staff around like royalty, watch Dad remind us how many decades he'd managed our fortune as though he'd built it himself. So when Mom called for a family vacation to reconnect, I should have known better. She baked her famous pecan pie the night she announced it, the whole house smelling sweet and warm like childhood itself. But under that sugar was something bitter. I noticed the way Michael leaned back in his chair smirking and the way Rachel kept glancing at her phone instead of looking at Grandma. I should have asked then why Grandma's smile didn't reach her eyes. The weeks leading up to the trip felt like a script I wasn't allowed to edit. Group texts pinged with hotel confirmations, dinner reservations, and Rachel's constant chatter about matching outfits for family photos by the pool. Grandma never said a word in those threads. She just nodded when asked if she was excited, her thin hands folding and unfolding in her lap like she was trying to convince herself she belonged. I noticed little things. Dad reviewing documents at his desk late at night, sliding them into folders before I could see. Mom talking about financial discipline with the same sharpness she usually reserved for gossiping about neighbors. Michael bragging about how he'd arranged the premium seating. None of them ever asked Grandma if she wanted to go. It was just assumed her name was being used, her money was covering the bill, so of course she'd be there. The morning of the flight, the house buzzed with chaos. Suitcases lined the hallway. Rachel snapped at the housekeeper for packing her shoes wrong. Michael argued on the phone with some client, pacing like the airport was already waiting for him. I walked into the kitchen and saw Grandma sitting quietly at the table, a small travel folder clutched against her chest. She'd packed her own snacks, little bags of almonds, a paperback novel she'd read a dozen times. She looked like a kid hoping not to get left behind on a field trip. At the airport, the smell of coffee and jet fuel hung in the air, announcements echoing overhead. We moved through security in a pack, my siblings, gliding with that careless confidence of people who believe the world bends for them. Grandma stayed close to me, her steps small, her breathing a little shallow. Then came the moment. The gate agent scanned boarding passes one by one. Beep for Michael, beep for Rachel, beep for my parents. and then Grandma handed hers over. The agent frowned, scanned again, and looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said softly. "This passenger isn't on the list." Grandma froze her face, paling as she clutched her folder tighter. "That can't be right," she whispered. I paid." Dad slid his boarding pass across with a shrug. "There must have been a mix-up. We can't hold the plane." His voice was calm, almost bored, like he was excusing a parking ticket instead of abandoning his mother. No one else said a word. Rachel pretended to check her phone. Michael smirked, already turning toward the jet bridge. I stood there, my chest tightening as Grandma's eyes darted to mine. That's when I realized it wasn't an error. It wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. They had carved her name out of the trip she had bankrolled. I took her hand. "Come on, Grandma," I said quietly, guiding her away from the counter. Her suitcase wheels clicked against the tile as we walked back toward the exit. Behind us, the rest of the family boarded without a backward glance. And as the boarding gate closed, a truth settled in my stomach like a stone. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a plan. The taxi ride home was quiet except for the rattle of Grandma's suitcase in the trunk. She sat beside me, staring out the window, her ticket folder still clutched in her lap, like it might change its mind and sprout a boarding pass. When we pulled into the driveway, the housekeeper looked surprised to see us. Forgot something she asked. Grandma shook her head and went straight upstairs without a word. That night, I found her in the garden. She was trimming roses, her hands steady, but her eyes blank, like she couldn't feel the thorns anymore. "They left me," she said simply, as if naming it out loud might lessen the sting. I wanted to tell her it was just a mistake, but the lie stuck in my throat. Instead, I went inside and opened my laptop. I typed until my fingers cramped. Elder financial exploitation, legal rights for seniors trust fund, misuse. Page after page lit up with stories of families siphoning money from the most vulnerable, the people who had built everything. And there, in black and white, was the phrase that made my blood run cold. Elder financial abuse is one of the most common but least reported crimes in America. The receipts were all there. Bank transfers labeled as family expenses, credit card statements showing spa trips, business dinners, luxury handbags. Every line screamed that the so-called family vacation had never been about Grandma. It had been about bleeding her dry until she had nothing left but silence. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. The next morning, I found a number online and called. "Law Office of Daniel Price," a calm voice answered. I didn't even hesitate. "I need help. It's about my grandmother. My family's been using her money and they just abandoned her at the airport." We met 2 days later in a small office downtown. Mr. Price was straightforward, no sugarcoating. He flipped through the folder of documents I'd pulled from the desk at home. "You've got a case," he said, "a strong one. If she wants to press charges, we can freeze accounts and file for restitution." When I told Grandma, she just looked at me, her eyes watering. "I don't want to hurt them," she whispered. "They're still my children." I took her hand just like I had at the airport. "You won't be hurting them, Grandma. You'll be protecting yourself. And this time, I'll be standing right beside you." We signed the paperwork that night. Her signature shook, but mine carved hard lines across the page. And as I slid the documents back into the folder, one thought burned steady in my chest. The day they came home, they wouldn't be met with hugs. We'd be waiting with the truth. The day of their return, the airport felt colder than it had when we left. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, announcements crackled through the speakers, and travelers hustled past with rolling suitcases. Grandma sat beside me in a navy coat, her hands folded in her lap, her mouth set in a thin line. She didn't say much, but I could see the storm behind her eyes. We weren't alone. Mr. Price, the lawyer, stood nearby with a briefcase, his tie slightly crooked, but his voice calm when he reminded me, once they're served, everything changes. Stay composed. Let the papers speak. The gate doors opened and out they came. My father, first chin high, dragging his leather carry-on like a soldier returning from a victorious campaign. Mom followed, her sunglasses still on, though we were indoors clutching Rachel's arm. Michael trailed behind, phone pressed to his ear, bragging to someone about closing a deal in Maui. Their laughter carried across the terminal like nothing had happened. Then they saw us. My father's step faltered. Lauren, mother. He forced a smile. You didn't have to come all the way out here. Grandma didn't answer. She just sat straighter. That's when Mr. Price stepped forward. Charles Hayes. His voice was steady, formal. On behalf of Eleanor Hayes, we are serving you notice for financial exploitation of a dependent adult. You are required to appear in court within 30 days. The words hung in the air like gunfire. What is this nonsense? Dad barked, his face flushing red. He grabbed the envelope, skimmed it, then looked up at me, his eyes burning. You did this? I held his gaze. I didn't do this. You did. I just made sure someone finally saw it. Rachel let out a sharp laugh, too loud, too brittle. This is a stunt. Mom, say something. But Mom was frozen, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the pages. Line after line laid bare the transfers, the charges, the lies. Michael snapped his phone shut. This is ridiculous. We're a family. You don't drag family through courts. Grandma's voice cut through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Family doesn't leave me at an airport. The terminal seemed to fall silent around us. Even strangers slowed to watch. My father's voice cracked as he tried again, softer now. Mom, please, you don't understand, no Charles. She said, her tone sharp as a blade. I understand perfectly. You wanted me small, quiet and broke. But not anymore. Mr. Price handed over the rest of the documents, his expression unreadable. There will be a full audit. Until then, all accounts linked to Mrs. Hayes are frozen. Michael's face drained of color. Frozen? You can't do that, my business expenses. I cut him off. The same way you told me my nonprofit work was unsustainable. Now you get to find out what unsustainable feels like. Rachel stepped forward, mascara smudged under her eyes. Lauren, you can't be serious. You're destroying us. I almost laughed. Destroying you. You destroyed yourselves the minute you decided Grandma's money was your personal vacation fund. They were unraveling. Dad's voice turned pleading. Let's talk about this at home. Not here, not like this. But I was done hiding behind closed doors. No. Right here. Right now. In front of witnesses so you can't twist the story later. A TSA officer wandered closer. Curious, but Mr. Price gave a subtle shake of his head. No need for more drama. Grandma rose to her feet slowly, her frail frame straightening with a dignity I hadn't seen in years. She looked each of them in the eye. You left me. You left me sitting alone while you boarded a plane with my money in your pockets. That isn't family. That's theft. For once, none of them had an answer. The moment stretched thick with silence. I could hear a baby crying somewhere near baggage claim the squeak of suitcase wheels on tile, the faint static of the intercom. Everything ordinary except for the earthquake happening in the middle of Gate 17. Finally, Dad muttered, "You'll regret this, Lauren. You think you're powerful, but you're nothing without this family." I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. "No, Dad, I'm nothing without Grandma, and you're nothing without her either. Remember that." Mr. Price closed his briefcase. We're done here. We walked away, leaving them standing there like statues, my father clutching legal papers, my mother, pale Michael, tapping furiously on his phone, Rachel trying not to cry. For once, their designer clothes and practiced confidence meant nothing. Outside, the cold air hit my face sharp and bracing. Grandma squeezed my hand. "You shouldn't have to fight this hard for me," she whispered. I shook my head. "I'm not fighting for you, Grandma. I'm fighting with you, and we're going to win." That night, I lay awake replaying every look, every word at the airport. Their shock, their fear. It wasn't enough to undo the years of cruelty, but it was a start. For once, the balance had shifted. The people who had treated me like an afterthought were finally the ones scrambling exposed. The court date was coming, and they would face every dollar they stole, every lie they told. And I'd be there, sitting beside Grandma, ready for whatever came next. Court moved slower than I expected, but justice has a way of landing heavy when it finally comes down. Weeks later, we sat in a wood-paneled courtroom while my father shifted in his seat, sweat beading along his collar. The judge read through every line of the audit vacations disguised as medical expenses, luxury cars filed under household repairs, Rachel's endless credit card swipes passed off as caregiving costs. Grandma sat beside me, her hands folded, her face calm. She didn't need to raise her voice. The evidence spoke louder than any tears could. The verdict was clear. The accounts were restored under Grandma's control with strict oversight. My father lost his role in managing family finances. My mother's discretionary spending was slashed to a fraction. Michael and Rachel were ordered to repay portions of what they had siphoned their allowances cut to the bone. And for the first time, the law stood between Grandma and the people who had treated her like a wallet. Walking out of that courthouse, the air felt different, lighter. Grandma looked 10 years younger, like she could finally breathe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady. "I thought I'd have to carry this shame forever." I shook my head. "You don't carry shame for being betrayed. They do." In the weeks that followed, the house felt quieter. The argument stopped because there was nothing left to argue about. Grandma started spending mornings in the garden again, humming as she trimmed her roses. And me, I found myself reading more about advocacy, about laws protecting people like her. It wasn't enough to just fight for my own family. We weren't the only ones. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me from the porch, eyes warm, proud. "You've got his strength," she said once, meaning Grandpa. And for the first time, I believed her. In the end, I learned something that cut deeper than any courtroom verdict. Family isn't about bloodlines or big houses. It's about loyalty. You can share DNA with someone and still have them betray you. My father, my mother, my siblings, they had every chance to protect the woman who gave them everything. And when it mattered most, they chose greed. They chose to look away. They chose silence when she needed their voices. I chose differently. I chose to stand beside her, even when it meant standing against them. That single choice, taking her hand at the airport, calling the lawyer, refusing to let their excuses slide, changed everything. And that choice saved her. Now, when I look back, I don't just remember the betrayal. I remember the strength I didn't know I had until I was forced to use it. I remember my grandmother's hand tightening around mine in the courtroom, the way her eyes finally carried relief instead of fear. And I remember the silence on my family's faces when they realized they could no longer hide behind money or tradition. That silence was louder than any apology they could have given. So if this story hit you the way it hit me, drop a comment below. Tell me if you've ever had to stand up against your own family or protect someone when no one else would. Your words remind me I'm not alone. And maybe they'll remind someone else who's watching right now that they're not alone either. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next story I share might be the one you need to hear. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're proof that standing up, even when it feels impossible, can change everything.